A farmer can grow the cocoa used in a billion-dollar chocolate industry and still go home unable to feed his own children. That is not only a pricing problem, that is the price of invisibility. Because the world does not simply reward value. The world rewards value it can see, value it can verify, value it can trust, value it can reach. And when the producer cannot be seen, someone else gets to stand between the producer and the opportunity. Someone else tells the story. Someone else owns the relationship. Someone else controls the price. And someone else becomes wealthy from value they did not create. What's up, everyone? This is Joshua T. Berglan, the world's mayor, coming to you from Limbe, Cameroon. And this is the world's mayor experience. Today, I do not want to talk only about poor farmers receiving bad prices. I want to talk about something underneath the price, something underneath the market, something underneath the lack of financing, the weak distribution, the limited packaging, and the missing infrastructure. I want to talk about what it costs to exist without being seen, the price of invisibility. Imagine a farmer waking before sunrise. The world is still dark, but he is already working. He knows the soil. He knows the weather. He knows when the plant is sick. He knows when the rain has come too early or stayed away too long. His knowledge was not learned from a textbook. It was earned through years of observation, failure, sacrifice, instinct, and survival. He plants. He waits. He prays. He protects the crop. He fights insects. He carries the harvest. He loses sleep. He risks everything. And then, when the crop is finally ready, a buyer arrives and names the price. Not the farmer, the buyer. The farmer may know the land better than anyone, but the buyer knows the market. The farmer may have created the product, but the buyer controls access to the customer. The farmer may carry the risk, but someone else controls the information. And the person who controls the information usually controls the negotiation. An invisible farmer is not necessarily a small farmer. He is a producer trapped outside the room where his value is priced. An invisible producer is not a producer without value. It is a producer who has been locked outside the room where value is recognized, financed, branded, and rewarded. This does not only affect one farmer. It affects the cooperative, the village, the nation, the continent, and eventually the world. Because whenever valuable people remain invisible, humanity loses access to knowledge, products, ideas, and solutions that could have served us all. We often define poverty as the absence of money, but sometimes poverty is not the absence of resources. Sometimes it is the absence of visibility, structure, ownership, and access around those resources. A village can be surrounded by fertile land and still struggle. A country can possess extraordinary natural wealth and still borrow against its own future. A continent can supply the world and still be spoken about as though it has nothing. There can be an abundance in the ground and poverty in the home. There can be genius in the village and no seat at the table. There can be a global product growing on local land while the local producer remains unknown. That is the violence of invisibility. It separates value from the person who created it. The world enjoys the chocolate but never learns the farmer's name. The world drinks the coffee but never sees the community. The world wears the fabric but never meets the hands that made it. The world dances to the music but does not understand the culture that gave birth to the sound. The world extracts the mineral but does not see the families living above it. The product travels, the profit travels, the story travels, but the producer remains behind. That is not simply unfortunate. That is an economic system functioning exactly as it was designed to function. When you are invisible, people can speak for you without ever speaking to you. They can decide what you need. They can decide what you're capable of. They can decide whether you are ready. They can decide what your land is worth. They can decide what your labor is worth. They can decide what your product is worth. And they can build policies, businesses, charities, and entire industries around a version of your story that you never authorized. When you do not control your story, you do not merely lose attention, you lose negotiating power, you lose context, you lose credit, you lose identity, and eventually you can lose ownership. A product without documented origin can be renamed. A traditional process without protection can be claimed by someone else. An idea without evidence can be stolen. A cultural practice without preservation can become a global trend with no connection to the people who carried it for generations. A farmer without public identity can become nothing more than an anonymous line inside someone else's supply chain. This is why I keep saying that media is not vanity. Not when it's used correctly. Media can be protection. Media can be evidence. Media can establish origin. Media can preserve history. Media can build trust. Media can create access. Media can expose injustice. Media can prove consistency. Media can turn an unknown producer into a recognized economic participant. But I want to go deeper than economics, because the principle is rooted in creation itself. The first chapter of Genesis does not describe a creator producing random things and leaving them without identity. God spoke, light appeared, he separated light from darkness, he established order. He named the day, he named the night, he separated the waters, he brought forth the land, he commanded the earth to produce. He blessed what was living, and he instructed it to multiply. Look at the pattern. There was vision, there was speech, there was light, there was separation, there was order, there was identity, there was production, there was multiplication, there was stewardship. Creation was not only about making something exist. Creation revealed what existed, gave it identity, placed it in order, and gave it a purpose. That is not just a spiritual principle, that is a principle of success. You cannot build sustainability without vision. You cannot communicate vision without language. You cannot protect what you refuse to name. You cannot multiply what you have not organized. You cannot steward what you have not documented. And you cannot expect the world to understand value that you have made impossible to find. Some people believe that hiding is humility. It's not always humility. Sometimes hiding is fear wearing religious clothing. Humility says, the gift came through me, but it did not begin with me. Fear says, because I do not want to appear prideful, I'll never develop, present, or share what I've been given. Those are not the same thing. You do not honor the Creator by burying what He trusted you to carry. You honor the Creator by developing it, by protecting it, improving it, multiplying it, and using it in service to others. Faith is not hiding your gift and waiting for someone to magically discover it. Faith is preparing your gift to be found. Faith is building before the crowd arrives. Faith is organizing before the investor calls. Faith is documenting before the buyer asks for proof. Faith is preparing the barn before the harvest overwhelms you. You cannot pray for rain and refuse to prepare the field. You cannot pray for a harvest and refuse to build the barn. You cannot pray for buyers while remaining impossible to verify. You cannot ask God to enlarge your territory while refusing to create the systems needed to steward what is coming. Preparation is an act of faith. Documentation is an act of stewardship. Visibility can be an act of service. Because when the right people can find you, The gift can finally reach the people it was created to serve. There is a hidden season in every seed. The seed disappears beneath the ground. For a time, nobody applauds it. Nobody sees what is happening. Nobody can photograph the roots. But hidden does not mean dead. Hidden does not mean forgotten. Hidden does not mean insignificant. Something is forming where nobody can see it. But the seed was not designed to remain buried forever. Its hidden season prepares it for visible fruit. The darkness was part of the process. It was never meant to become the final destination. Some farmers, founders, artists, communities, and nations have mistaken a long hidden season for permanent identity. They have been overlooked for so long that they have started to believe invisibility is normal. They have been underpaid for so long that they have started to believe exploitation is the only market available. They have been ignored for so long that they no longer expect anyone to listen. But being overlooked does not mean you have nothing worth seeing. Being underfunded does not mean you are incapable. Being unknown does not mean you are unqualified. And being hidden does not mean you were created to remain invisible. There is a time to develop quietly, but there is also a time to emerge with evidence. A time to say, this is who we are. This is what we produce. This is where it comes from. This is how it's made. This is what makes it valuable. This is what we can deliver. And this is what we need. And this is how you can work with us. That is where media must become more than entertainment. Strategic media does not simply make the farmer look inspiring. It documents the farm. It identifies the producer. It records the process. It shows the product. It captures the history. It explains the quality. It establishes the location. It preserves the testimony. It proves the impact, and it provides a clear pathway for action. Call the producer. Buy the product. Visit the region. Finance the operation. Support the cooperative. Stock the inventory. Invest in the infrastructure. Partner with the community. A story without a pathway becomes another emotional experience that changes nothing. The audience feels something. The producer receives nothing. The video gets views. The farmer remains invisible to the market. The documentary wins an award. The village remains poor. That is not enough. The purpose of telling the story is not simply to make the invisible emotionally interesting. The purpose is to make the invisible economically, socially, and politically undeniable. The farmer must become known. The cooperative must become trusted. The production must become documented. The product must become traceable. The opportunity must become understandable. The producer must become bankable, invisible, known, trusted, documented, bankable. Those are not merely stages of media growth. They are stages of economic participation. A buyer asks, "Can I find you?" A customer asks, "Can I trust you?" A financier asks, "Can you prove what you have done?" An investor asks, "Can this grow?" A policymaker asks, "What does the evidence show?" A partner asks, "Who is accountable?" Media cannot answer every question, but without media, many of those conversations never begin. Imagine a cooperative doing excellent work for 10 years. Hundreds of farmers, thousands of harvests, families supported, knowledge shared, challenges overcome, but none of it is documented. There is no digital record, no product catalog, no clear history, no interviews, no production data presented in a way outsiders understand, no website, no contract pathway, no media archive. Then the cooperative approaches a bank. The people in the room know what they have accomplished. But the bank can only evaluate what it can see, measure, verify, and trust. 10 years of invisible work can look like no work at all. That is the price of invisibility. Imagine a village with extraordinary tourism potential, beautiful land, deep culture, traditional knowledge, food, music, art, history. But the only images the outside world ever sees are connected to crisis, conflict, poverty, disaster, need. Eventually, even when the children in that village may begin to see their home through the eyes of people who only arrive when something is wrong, they may believe beauty exists somewhere else, opportunity exists somewhere else, success exists somewhere else, dignity exists somewhere else. Invisibility does not only steal money, it can steal imagination. It can teach a child that nothing important comes from where they come from. It can convince a young person that they must abandon home to become valuable. It can make an entire generation blind to the wealth sitting in its own hands. That is why representation matters. Not representation as decoration, representation as proof. Proof that innovation lives here. Proof that intelligence lives here. Proof that beauty lives here. Proof that successful businesses can be built here. Proof that global products can come from here. Proof that a child does not have to disappear from their identity in order to succeed. Imagine a child seeing their mother's product presented professionally for the first time, not sitting anonymously on a roadside table, but photographed beautifully, named, packaged, documented, connected to its origin, displayed on a digital storefront where people from around the world can discover it. That child is not only seeing a product, that child is seeing possibility. My mother's work matters. My community creates value. What comes from here can travel. We do not have to remain invisible. That shift in belief can change a generation. But visibility must be handled carefully, because being seen without being protected can create another form of exploitation. A story can go viral when the person inside the story remains poor. A product can become popular while the original producer is removed from the supply chain. A community can be featured while someone else owns the footage, platform, audience, and revenue. A traditional practice can be celebrated internationally while the people who preserved it receive no credit or compensation. Exposure is not empowerment. Attention is not ownership. Being featured is not the same as being included. And virility is not the same as value. We must ask, who owns the story? Who owns the footage? Who owns the brand? Who controls the data? Who has the customer relationship? Who receives the payment? Who benefits 5 years from now? The goal is not to make African producers visible so that someone else can extract from them more efficiently. The goal is to make African producers visible, trusted, documented, protected, and powerful enough to participate in defining their own value. This is where the phone becomes more than a phone. The phone can document the land, record the harvest, interview the producer, capture the process, show the quality, preserve the story, connect the buyer, create the evidence, and establish a public declaration. Here we are. We produce this. This belongs to us. This is how we do it. This is what makes it valuable. And this is how you can work with us. Sometimes the first act of economic resistance is refusing to remain undocumented. Sometimes the first step towards ownership is naming what already belongs to you. Sometimes the first step toward freedom is creating evidence that can no longer be ignored. There are farmers praying for buyers, but somewhere a buyer may be praying for a reliable farmer. There are founders praying for investment, but somewhere an investor may be searching for a meaningful opportunity. There are communities praying for tourism, but somewhere a traveler may be searching for a place that feels real, beautiful, and connected to purpose, like me in Cameroon. There are young people praying for direction, but perhaps the solution is already living in the knowledge of an elder no one has taken the time to record. The problem may not be that answers do not exist. The problem may be that answers cannot find one another. Media can become the bridge. Not media that performs poverty, not media that exploits pain, not media that turns a farmer into content and then leaves. Media that connects, media that documents, media that protects, media that creates pathways, media that builds trust between people who need one another but have never been introduced. So, what does invisibility cost? It costs the farmer negotiating power. It costs the cooperative financing. It costs the founder credibility. It costs the village tourism. It costs the artisan ownership. It costs the child imagination. It costs the policymaker accurate information. It costs the nation economic leverage. It costs the continent control over its story. And it costs the world access to extraordinary products, knowledge, culture, and solutions. The cost is too high. African producers need more than access, because access can be temporary, access can be controlled, access can be withdrawn, access can still leave someone else in power. Producers need identity, they need documentation, they need direct relationships, they need trusted systems, they need ownership, they need infrastructure, they need the ability to speak for themselves, and they need a permanent place inside the economy, not a temporary invitation into someone else's room. Success follows principles visible in creation. Bring light, create order, name what exists, separate what is authentic from what is false, cultivate what has been planted, protect what has been entrusted, multiply what serves. And the rest only after work has been stewarded well. And rest only after the work has been stewarded well. The Creator brought light into darkness not because darkness had no contents, but because what existed needed to be revealed. Light does not create the farmer's value. Light reveals it. Light does not create the product's quality. Light allows others to see it. Light does not manufacture the opportunity. Light makes the opportunity visible. Let there be light over the farms. Let there be light over the cooperatives. Let there be light over the villages. Let there be light over the products. Let there be light over the stories. Let there be light over the solutions. But when the light comes, responsibility comes with it. Tell the truth. Protect the origin. Honor the people. Document the evidence. Build the systems. Create clear pathways. Refuse exploitation, and make sure the people who create the value remain connected to the value. To the farmer who feels unseen, your invisibility is not proof that you are insignificant. To the founder who has been ignored, silence from the market is not always rejection of your value. Sometimes the market simply does not know where to find you. To the community that has been misrepresented, you have the right to document yourselves. To the young person convinced that success only exists somewhere else, look again. There may be a harvest hiding inside what you were taught to overlook. Do not bury the gift. Do not abandon the seed. Do not confuse the hidden season with the final destination. Prepare, develop, document, protect, speak, build, and when the opportunity arrives, be ready with evidence. The future will not belong only to those who produce the most. It will belong to those who can prove what they produce, communicate why it matters, protect what they own, deliver what they promise, and build trusted relationships around their value. The farmer must become visible, not for fame, for negotiation. The cooperative must become visible, not for applause, for financing. The village must become visible, not for exploitation, for opportunity. The culture must become visible, not as a trend, as an inheritance. The producer must become visible, not as someone else's content, as an owner. The price of invisibility has been paid for long enough. It has been paid through low prices, lost opportunities, stolen credit, unwritten histories, abandoned villages, broken confidence, and generations taught to believe that their value had to be validated somewhere else. It is time to stop paying that price. It is time to document the harvest, name the producer, protect the story, build the platform, open the market, create the evidence, and let the people who produce the value finally participate in the wealth it creates. This has been the World's Mayor Experience. I'm Joshua T. Berglan, the World's Mayor, coming to you from Limbe, Cameroon. Remember this: what remains invisible can be ignored, underpaid, misrepresented, and stolen. But what is brought into the light, documented with truth, protected through ownership, and stewarded with faith can become the foundation of freedom. Let there be light. Let there be evidence. Let there be ownership. And let the people who have led the world, supplied the world, fed the world, inspired the world, and built value for the world finally be seen by the world. God bless Cameroon. God bless Africa. God bless every farmer, founder, producer, artist, builder, and community preparing to step out of invisibility and into the purpose they were created to fill.